So an absolutely enormous reveal of 40k box sets today. We've got 8 new discount sets coming out for their Christmas release. Perhaps good news for Imperium or Chaos, but much less so for Xenos. Hello and welcome back to Warspets Tactics, where today we're talking about these new revealed Christmas box sets, and we're going to be going through each one in turn, talking about exactly what's included, roughly how much value it might add up to, and a few thoughts as to how useful it is on the tabletop, or how good it is in terms of value of kits being discounted. The way it works with Games Workshop is that each year they generally tend to unleash some Christmas Battleforce box sets, generally big and chunky sets that cost upwards of £100 or around about the $200 mark, and they sort of have the feel of a Combat Patrol box set, but more. A little mini army with HQs, vehicles and troops, and all coming at a fairly decent discount compared with their normal prices that you'd buy these miniatures separately for from their shop. This year it seems that there's a big 8 of them, and the theme of this year's box set seemed to be that they're all built around one special character, say either Magnus or Mortarion, or a special character from one of the other factions. The recipients of these box sets are the Sisters of Battle, the Adeptus Custodes, the Adeptus Mechanicus, Knights, which could also be used for Chaos Knights I believe, Thousand Suns, Death Guard, and there's 2 different themed Space Marine ones for the Imperial Fists and Raven Guard. In previous years there's generally tended to be a bit of a split between the Imperium, Chaos and Xenos, but it looks like this year there's no Xenos whatsoever, which seems like a pretty odd choice to me. It would have been nice to see something like some Craftworld Eldar, or Orcs or Necrons. Generally they go down very well when they do big discount boxes for either of those factions. Last year their price point for these has been around about £130, $210 or €160, and often they haven't been the exact same price for every single box set. Some have been a little bit more expensive or a little less depending on the contents. Last year I believe that they got released in early December. They haven't given us any real details as to when they're actually coming out yet I believe, but if we go by the precedent last year, I believe it was the first week of December that they dropped, and it was just a case of when they're gone, and some of the stock that they had sold out really quite quickly. Again, going by last year, they tended to give around about a 30 to 40% discount compared with the items sold separately. That's generally okay for Games Workshop, that's in line with their combat patrols and things like that, but perhaps with these ones they often choose some slightly more interesting or useful miniatures to put in the boxes. You tend to get a fair few more newish miniatures coming out in these than perhaps in some of the combat patrols. In any case, let's take a look through the box sets and have a look at what we've got. So starting out, we've got the Sisters of Battle Sanctorum Guard. This one seems to be a very Paragon heavy box set, led by Morven Varl. There's 2 sets of 3 Paragon warsuits, 1 unit of 10 Battle Sisters, and 1 set of 5 Sacrosants. For those models separately, it'll be $320 or £190, and I feel like those numbers are quite encouraging for being roughly around the same sort of price. If it was an £130 or $210 release, that'd be around about 32% off, kind of similar to what they do normally. I do feel that building these around a unique character in each box set does kind of discourage people from getting multiple sets of these, and if you already happen to have the special character within the set, it does diminish its value a bit. Say for example, if you're a Sisters of Battle player and you've already got Morven Varl, you're not really going to want another exact copy of her, so if you pick up the box set it probably makes sense to resell on eBay or something like that, which is just a bit annoying to have to do. In general though, if you're looking to jump into Sisters, I feel like these are really quite tempting models. You are quite likely to want Morven Varl in the army, the Paragon warsuits work pretty well at the moment, and Celestian Sacrosants are fairly recent miniatures as well and quite cool ones. I generally feel that this is Nundan Walkers the box set though. If you like the Paragon warsuits then you'll like this. If you don't like the aesthetic of them, then you probably don't want to pick it up. Overall though, always handy to have another solid option to get Sisters on the tabletop. They are a relatively expensive army to collect, so any discount bundles are usually very much appreciated. Next up though, and perhaps one of the single most tempting boxes out of any of these, are these Adeptus Custodes Watchers of the Gate, and perhaps due to the very nature of Custodes, this gives you the best part of a whole army in one box set. Trajan Valoris, 3 Virtus Praetors, 15 Custodian Guard, and 3 Alarus Custodians. That's really quite a solid amount of golden armour for the money. In terms of cost separately, it's just shy of $340 and it's just over £220, and due to Custodians generally being fairly expensive per point in game, it does mean that you get an awful lot of points in this set. I believe that even if you build them on their fairly bare bones loadouts, you get around about 1300 points worth of models. Never mind the fact that you could build some of the on-foot custodians either as a Vexilla or a shield captain potentially. so you could have an extra few on foot characters that cost a lot more points than the standard ones. I feel like this one is going to be really popular. It basically gets you an entire army in one box. Most of the units are really usable for custodians right now. I think out of any of those, it's only the Alaris custodians that are maybe a bit suboptimal. But with Games Workshop rebalancing things, I think there's every chance that they might get thrown a bone at some stage. It seems to pair pretty decently with the Combat Patrol box as well, if you wanted to flesh it out all the way up to 2,000 points in one big go. That would get you a few Sisters of Silence as well, and then you'd pretty much have virtually all the Custodes range altogether. Very popular. I suspect that one will be one to watch for selling out early. Next up, we've got the Adeptus Mechanicus and their Elimination Maniple. This one's headed up by none other than Belisarius Hall himself, then 6 Cataphren Servitors, 2 Castellan robots and their attendant Datasmith, and then 10 Skitarii troops that can be built as Rangers or Vanguard. This one seems to be a tiny bit lower in value than the other two at $310 or £184, though still very much on the same sort of level. I feel like while the previous two had really quite usable units in game at the moment, currently a lot of the stuff here really is quite underwhelming. Cole was very rarely played in any sort of competitive list, the Cataphrons struggle to compete with the Skitarii, and the Castellans are still a bit on the pricey side as well. With Admech really struggling at the moment though, I really wouldn't be surprised if a fair bit of this didn't get points adjustments in the next chapter approved. I feel like there'd at least be some fair chances of some improvements later on. For the theme of the gut box, it is quite Cataphron and Cult Mechanicus heavy. I think for some that'd be a positive, some a bit more of a negative. Depends on whether or not you like the chunky robots and slightly twisted servitors vibe as opposed to the more militaristic Skitarii. But it does seem like a really quite decent chunk of a Mechanicus force, again an army that tends to cost a bit more than some of the others in 40k. Next up, we've got the Imperial Knight Chainbreaker Lance. Kind of a surprise to see knights in representation here. They haven't really tended to crop up in these Christmas Battleforce boxes, and it's quite rare for their models to get discounts in general. I guess partly because their range only consists of 3 different kits at the moment. In this one you get the Knight Preceptor, which builds any Questoris. It's built as Canis Rex here, but you could build it as any of the others if you wanted. Then 2 Armiger Helverins and 2 Armiger Warglaves. In the fluff text they do describe them as just being those individual models of Knight, as opposed to having the choice between Helverins and Warglaves as you get in the current kit. I think that's a little bit ambiguous at the moment. It might give you the option to build them all as one type, or they might be limiting the weapons as they did in the past. In terms of separate cost, it seems fairly decent as well, $340 or £205. And again, I do feel that this one's likely to be very popular indeed. Like the Custodes, it's a really quick way to get a huge chunk of the army on the table in a few big models. Depending on loadouts, it looks like you're looking at least 1,000 points in this box set, so again a pretty quick way to jump into a different faction if you'd like to. What's also interesting is that this could also be used as a bit of a stealth box set for Chaos Knights. Obviously the more themed ones are their own unique War Dogs and their Abominant as well, but you can still field the standard Questoris Knights as a Despoiler and the Armigers as their own marks as well. The Helverins are pretty nice for the War Dog Executioners. Overall, either way, this does look usable whether or not you're Imperial or Chaos. Really quite a solid box set, and it's quite nice to get Knights get an actual discount for a change. Next up, we've got the 2 Chaos ones, Death Guard and Thousand Sons, and both of those are box sets built around their Primarch. The Death Guard have the Council of the Death Lord with Mortarion in Pride of Place. In the box set, you get Mortarion himself, 14 Plague Marines, and 5 Blight Lord Terminators, overall giving you around about $330 or £196 when bought separately. Again, this one looks really solid to be honest. Every one of those kits is a pretty popular one, and if you don't already have Mortarion, it does look like it could be a really good way to start a Death Guard army. Currently in game, Mass Plague Marines work really nicely with all their scary melee weapons, so they'd be quite a popular choice there. The Terminators are a solid anvil unit, and I feel like most of the people who will be collecting Death Guard will wind up getting the Primarch at some point or another. He is one of Games Workshop's most popular and best-selling box sets, and at least now in game he's a fair bit cheaper, even if he's not exactly running every competitive list. Seems like it'd pair decently with the Combat Patrol box set as well, with all the Poxwalkers that you get there. Between those two sets, you'd have really quite a decent Death Guard core army. Again, looks really quite solid for Death Guard collectors. The only issue is whether or not you've already got Mortarion. If you have, then again this one's probably not going to be worth it, or you're going to have to resell the Primarch. Next up, we've got the Thousand Sons with Magnus's Court of the Crimson King, and this one has a very similar vibe to it. Of course, Magnus the Red himself, plus 2 boxes of the core troops, 10 Rubik Marines in each, and then 3 Exalted Sorcerers as well, a plastic kit that comes with 3 of them that you can mount on discs and things. Again, not really much to complain about there. All of those are very solid kits for a Thousand Sons army. And again, while Magnus is probably a little bit suboptimal for the top tiers of competitive play, I still think he's usable with his new lower points cost, and of course he's just iconic to have in the army in the first place, being a pretty cool model. Much like the Plague Marines, in the last chapter approved Rubric Marines got some really nice points cuts. They're very efficient with their free gear now and cheap warp flamers if you want to. You can absolutely run them en masse and do very well with them. Again, there's the issue that if you already have Magnus, you're probably not going to want this, but the Sorcerers are really solid HQ choices, and I think above all, a lot of Thousand Sons players will probably just be applauding that Games Workshop managed to finally release a Thousand Sons discount bundle that doesn't include a whole bunch of Zangors in it to bulk it out. If you want a bunch of Goatbird boys though, then there's always the Combat Patrol, and again it looks like this would have pretty much no overlap with that, so it'd be quite good to get this and the Combat Patrol box set if you just wanted to start Thousand Sons in general. Overall, again, I feel it's a very solid box, and I'm sure it will be popular. Finally, we get on to the two Space Marine box sets, one of them themed around the Imperial Fists and Gravis armor, and the other one themed around the Raven Guard and Phobos armor. As kind of expected, it is very much all Primaris as per standard with Games Workshop these days. The Imperial Fists one gets you Tor Garadon, their unique captain, 3 aggressors, 15 heavy intercessors, and a set of the Imperial Fist upgrades and transfers. It looks like just one set from the way that they've worded it. I genuinely don't know whether they'd give you enough to use for all the shoulder pads in this force or not. I'd say that this one just isn't really particularly subtle. This one is basically Heavy Intercessors, the box set. If you want an absolute ton of chunky Space Marines in Gravis armor in the troop section, then this is going to be your go-to. They are a relatively recent kit, and I don't believe that they've been discounted anywhere before, so this is quite interesting if you did want to pick up a fair chunk of them, and you didn't want to pay the relatively expensive Games Workshop pricing of in the higher £30 for these guys, which to my mind does feel a bit excessive for 5 models, even if they are fairly chunky Gravis ones. Buying these separately would be around $320 or £195. That would include the value of the upgrades in there, which might be useful to some more than others. Though I must admit, I do feel that this one might be somewhat let down by being so themed to one chapter. Obviously, it's absolutely great for Imperial Fist players. If you like Imperial Fist and you like Gravis armor, then this is pretty amazing. Though admittedly, if you like both of those things, you might already have Mr. Garadon already. I feel like it's just a little bit on the annoying side though, if say you collected Space Marines of a different stripe and not Imperial Fists and you did want the Gravis Marines, it just means that you're either stuck with Tor Garadon, a character that you can't use, and some upgrades that you're probably not going to put on your models, and that would really diminish the value of this, or you could make the effort of reselling them I suppose, or maybe convert Mr. Tor Garadon into a different captain or something. I just feel that while the Strike Force really is quite interesting, and don't get me wrong, it's very themed, I feel like with locking it to Imperial Fist, both in terms of upgrades and the character, they really have made it a lot less useful to other Space Marine forces. I'll be interested to hear your guys' take on that though. Was it a good idea or not? Finally, we've got the Raven Guard Ravenstrike Battleforce. And to be honest, I'm a bit less excited by this one than the Imperial Fists one. I just feel like there's so many options for buying discounted Phobos Marines between the various battle forces and things that have come before, that this one just isn't going to be particularly outstanding for many people. If you want to start a Raven Guard force though, and you like the Phobos Primaris, then all well and good. In the box set you get Ravenstrike, 2 Invicta Tactical Warsuits, 10 Reavers, 3 Eliminators, which look like the multi-part plastic kit, so you could make both things, a Phobos Librarian, and again the Raven Guard upgrade sprue and transfers. Adding up the value of that, and at least on paper it looks like it could be the highest cost sold separately, around about $350 or £210, but again I do kind of feel that that's let down by the Raven Guard specific transfers and things, which might just take the edge off it a little bit compared with otherwise. Unit wise, I must admit most of this stuff just isn't particularly optimal right now for Space Marines. Ravenstrike is okay if you are playing pure Raven Guard, and Eliminators are arguably one of the best units in the Codex right now, but Reavers, the Invictors, and the Phobos Librarian don't tend to be super outstanding in my opinion. If you did want discounted Invictors and Reavers already, you could potentially pick up the Space Wolves Combat Patrol box set. That one already does come with those. Plus we already have the standard Combat Patrol Space Marines if you really want a Phobos heavy army, and arguably at a better discount than this one's likely to be. I'd guess that this one's probably not going to be super popular, though I'm sure will be useful to some, particularly if you like the Raven Guard aesthetic or Ravenstrike himself. Again, let me know what you think down in the comments below. So there we have it then. 8 big Christmas Battleforce boxes, and some interesting discounts and army compositions for a whole bunch of different factions there. I do feel that it's a bit of a shame to see no Xenos there. It does seem like a bit of a strange move on Games Workshop's part. In general, they do tend to manage to keep things fairly equal between Chaos, Imperium, and Xenos, at least when they're doing bundle releases like this. Out of the box sets that we do have, though, I think that the Adeptus Custodes one might be one of the best. That one really does get you the vast majority of an army in one fell swoop. That one really would be getting you an awful lot of points on the board. Otherwise, I think that pretty much most of the rest are decent enough. Really quite cool to see the Chaos Primarchs on show in their respective factions. I feel like the Imperial Knights one is just going to be very useful for anyone who's collecting Knights in general. And it's quite nice to see so many recent units on offer in the Sisters of Battle one. I kind of feel like maybe the AdMech one plus the Space Marine ones are perhaps some of the least appealing to me on first glance, but I'll be interested to hear your guys' takes. I'll hopefully be aiming to do a bit more of a breakdown on these sometime later in the week, so feel free to subscribe to Auspex Tactics if you'd like to see more. It'd be good to drill into the detail a bit more and see how many points you can get out of the boxes. I'll certainly be interested to cover when we actually get prices for the things as well. Hopefully that won't be too long. Finally, I'd just like to quickly mention that Auspex Tactics does have a Patreon page as well, which if you have been enjoying all the content on the channel, it is the thing that allows me to keep on making it happen. If you have been watching quite a bit, any support is enormously appreciated. Channel patrons do get a fair few advantages as well, seeing certain videos early, regular votes to see what sort of things come next on the channel, and automatic entry into the regular prize giveaways with a chance to win some really big model kits each month. If any of that sounds good to you, or you'd just like to help support, the link is down in the video description. In any case, a massive thank you for listening, and I'll hope to see you guys next time.